but then also to always know that you could never understand their experience. And that is both, I mean, to me, that's beauty, because that's the case even if oppression didn't exist. Like, there's no way that we could fully understand the experience of another human being. And that is what makes us grow. It's what, like, makes us create new things, and to be able to learn through difference, to connect with each other through different experiences is a beautiful thing.
You are listening to The Creative Imposter, episode number 46. Welcome to The Creative Imposter. I'm Andrea Klunder, and today I am delighted to bring to you my conversation with Andrea Ranae Johnson. Andrea Ranae is many things: a coach, an activist, an agent for social change. She is a brand new podcaster, but she is no stranger to speaking publicly on the issues that matter most to her. And if you want a little backstory as to where the idea for this particular episode came from, you can skip back to episode number 45 if you have not already listened to it. It's called Talking to Strangers, and it'll give you a little bit of insight as to how it is that we came to a place on The Creative Imposter to talk about imposter syndrome and feeling like a fake when it comes to the issue of social justice, racism, and the desire to be an ally, even when you don't always know exactly how. I made a commitment to Julie Neale of Mother's Quest to be a part of an initiative that is starting this month, September, to explore the idea of solidarity for the Black Lives Matter movement and for issues of social justice. And it made me uncomfortable because I didn't actually know in that moment when I committed to it, when I said yes, when I accepted the challenge, how exactly I would approach this topic or what I would say. And almost immediately after accepting the challenge, Andrea Ranae's new program, Coaching as Activism, popped up in my Facebook feed. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what we need at exactly this moment. We need to have a talk here on the podcast with you. This particular round of Coaching as Activism is starting very soon. And so if you are listening to this episode right when it comes out, you have until Wednesday of this week to sign up, which is September 13th, 2017. If you missed it, don't worry. Still go check out Andrea Ranae's website, which is andrearanae.com, and will be linked, of course, in the show notes at thecreativeimposter.com/046 and in the description for this episode in your podcast app, because it's been popular and I'm sure she's going to run it again. And even if not, there are so many great links and resources, including her new podcast, Liberty, that you're going to get a ton of value just by connecting with Andrea Ranae, no matter when you're listening to this. Okay, if you think that this topic sounds heavy or difficult or really not what you want to listen to, I encourage you to stick it out, because one thing that I love about Andrea Ranae's approach is that she's extremely positive and extremely hopeful in a very grounded, realistic way. She is in the thick of doing the not always straightforward work of merging and integrating the internal work of coaching and self-help with the external work of activism and social justice. I really enjoyed talking with her, and we probably could have gone on for several hours, but just for your sake, we didn't. So if you would like to continue the conversation, or if you think of some questions that I never get around to asking in this particular conversation, I'd love to continue it over in the Creative Imposter Facebook group, which you can find linked in the show notes or at thecreativeimposter.com/FB for Facebook. And of course, you can always connect directly with Andrea Ranae. Okay, here it is, my conversation with Andrea Ranae Johnson. Andrea Ranae Johnson, thank you so much for joining me on The Creative Imposter.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk.
So let's have you share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you are most excited about in your work and in your creative life right now.
So I am a coach and facilitator. I focus a lot on leadership and liberation. And when I say liberation, I mean not just personal freedom, but also generally like collective getting free from the things that don't serve us and don't serve our humanity. So I support a lot of people that are in leadership positions, whether that means that they're a coach or a teacher or in some kind of position in an organization where they have a lot of influence, and supporting them to get a grasp on the power that they have to use that influence to shift their communities and, on a larger scale, shift their world into one that is more just and more humane. So I am the creator of a program called Coaching as Activism that supports coaches and healers and transformative leaders to bring social transformation lens to their work. And then I'm also the co-founder of an organization called Whole Self Liberation, which supports and just offers a resource for people, no matter what they do, supporting them to just like unpack and heal and unlearn the toxic and harmful and oppressive things that we absorb when we're little kids and as we grow up and just live in the society, the things that keep us from connecting with ourselves and with each other and with the earth. All of that to say, I'm really excited about the things that I'm doing. For me, it feels like I can be creative and that I'm able to do something. I'm able to do like my part in making this world a better place.
Okay, so I'm glad that you said that you are excited about the work that you're doing because this topic can be extremely heavy because it's very serious and there are really horrific things that have been getting the attention of the news media as of late, like big scale things, right? And I'm caught in this place of wanting to discuss this topic from a place that feels empowering and that feels positive rather than it being this overwhelming, heavy doom and gloom. Because I think what happens is we see something horrible happen on the news, and then it gets replayed over and over again. And then it gets amplified on Facebook, right? And amplified on social media. And everyone's posting things and freaking out and panicking. But then that feeling of heaviness and that feeling of oppression and that feeling of overwhelm doesn't actually translate necessarily into action or into an improvement or into anything that we feel like we can do. And so I'm wondering if you can give us some insight into how do you recommend we deal with all of this negative news and very heavy, serious, tragic news that's coming to us a lot lately.
Yeah, I mean, this morning, this morning, and just like generally all day, I've been feeling like kind of heavy and just felt this deep sense of urgency coupled with this feeling of of overwhelm and just how can I help? And I think that's something that a lot of people feel that like these things are so big, these problems have been happening for so long. How can I, this one person, me as an individual, change something like that? And I was also thinking when you invited me on to your show, I was wondering, okay, so where does imposter syndrome show up in this work that I'm doing and supporting other people to do? And I think one thing that I'm really committed to unearthing is the fact that we have power. We have the power to change what's currently happening in this world. And I think where imposter syndrome comes in is that we see things, they're so big, they're so daunting, and we say, there's no way I could change anything. Who am I to even try? And with that kind of mentality, it's not going to change. And so, yeah, the thing that is pretty high up on my priority list in terms of my work with people is supporting them to see like the places where they have opportunities to influence. And even though it might be small or it might seem like it's not immediately affecting something, we have so many opportunities constantly all around us to shift our culture, to shift our society, to shift systems, to shift ourselves and the way that we relate to each other, and to bring awareness to those and seek out those opportunities because they're there.
Do you think that news media, tragic events, huge things happen, and suddenly everyone pays attention for a little while? But racism and inequality and social injustice is not something that is limited to a few isolated incidents, and it's not something that's new that just suddenly appeared. I keep thinking of like small ways that this shows up in our life, in our world, and how we can look for opportunities to affect change on a small individual level. And I'll give you an example of what I'm thinking about. So I was just in Southern California for this podcasting conference, and I was staying in a neighborhood that is primarily Hispanic. And I was attending a conference in an area that's very like Disneyland and convention center and tourists and things like that. And I was picked up by an Uber driver from the hotel to go to where I was staying, like, 15, 20 minutes away. And he's like, "Oh, why are you staying in that area?" And the driver was like a white middle-aged man. And I didn't know why he said that because I couldn't see anything wrong with the area that I was staying in. It seemed like a very family-centric neighborhood. It didn't feel dangerous or sketchy or anything like that to me. It was a well-maintained neighborhood. And he's like, "Why are you going to that neighborhood?" I said, "Oh, my friend has a house there and I'm staying with her." And then he proceeded to make a series of very oblique kind of racist comments about, "Oh, those people that live in that area are like this." I think I made a comment like, "Oh, there's a lot of people out and about today." Once we got to close to where I was staying, "There's a lot of people out and about today." And he's like, "Yeah, that's how it is with these people." I was so shocked by how he was talking to me. I wanted to call him out on it, but I also was like, I'm not trying to pick a fight with my Uber driver right now. I'm just trying to go home. And so I think that these tiny little microaggressions happen all the time. And I feel like there's a real opportunity there to be aware of them and to take some kind of action on that tiny granular scale. But like in that moment, I didn't say anything directly to him because I was so shocked and I wasn't sure what to say. And then I also was thinking like, oh, I'm going to give him a bad review and I'm going to cite racism as the reason I'm giving him a bad review. And then I was like, well, that seems weird too.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about that pervasiveness of this kind of thinking and this problem that we have in our society.
Yeah, well, since we're both in Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
I have like a example from and relates to like what you just shared too. Last night my dad had a party. He lives on the south side, and it was just like a gathering of him and his friends, and he invited like 70 people, and maybe like 12 people came, and they were all black. And if for people that don't know, like the south side is predominantly black. And he was talking, there was one person that came that wasn't black. He's a Latino. And we were just talking afterward about like how glad he was that he came, that the Latinx guy came, because he knew that that was kind of like a out of the norm for him. And my first thought was, oh yeah, people don't want to come to the South Side. Like you invite people to the South Side, people don't want to come down here because there's so much prejudice, and because of the way that the city is set up, there it's so segregated
Mm-hmm.
that people, especially on the North Side, do not venture out to the South Side or the West
Mm-hmm.
Side unless they absolutely need to. So there's moments like that for the people that got those invitations. I don't know what I can't assume like what prevented them from getting there, but especially for the people that weren't black who looked at those invitations, there's a moment there of reflection of just like, why am I not going? Am I going because it's on the South Side and I don't want to be on the South Side because the South Side makes me uncomfortable? And why does the South Side make me uncomfortable? So I think what in our everyday lives in every moment, one thing that we can do is hold ourselves accountable and hold our like family members, our friends accountable to the way that they're showing up and how that might be influencing and impacting these larger issues. Because people not wanting to come to the South Side is both a symptom and a pillar of why the South Side is so under-resourced. And so that's just like a tiny thing that exists probably in a lot of big cities where the population is kind of segregated.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if somebody says something about trans people or like what's going on right now around DACA and undocumented immigrants, really one having just having the conversation, like not avoiding talking about these difficult, hard things, especially if they're not affecting you, that's you definitely need to be talking about them. Because just because they're not affecting you doesn't mean that you're not influencing them. So little things where we go to the uncomfortable place, we go to the uncomfortable conversation, we go to the uncomfortable question of ourselves. And then like the choices that we make. In that moment, were you in an Uber in the story that you told? Or like
Yeah, I was in an
a
Uber.
car or
Yeah.
something like yeah, in that moment there's so many things at play, right? Like he's in charge of the car that you're in. Like, so there's like an inherent power dynamic where,
Right.
you never know what could happen if you really challenge him. And at the same time, there's so many different scenarios that could play out as. And like I had a similar thing happen to a friend when I was in San Antonio. My friend got into a car. She was black and is black, and she got into a car, and he had a like a Confederate flag somewhere in his car,
Oh,
and she was like, I. I don't even know what I would do in that situation. I would just probably
yeah.
try to like get out of the car as soon as I could or something. But there are moments where we like see things or we hear things and we either know that they're wrong or we think that they might be kind of dehumanizing or racist. And we can use those moments, especially if we have a relationship with the person that's showing up in that way, or if it's you that's showing up that way, to go there, to go to that
Hmm.
place.
Yeah, I mean, and it is super uncomfortable not just to recognize it in other people or in someone you know or in a stranger, but to recognize these things that are ingrained in us, right? Because as you're talking about Chicago being very segregated, and I live in a near Northwest Side neighborhood that is, very predominantly white. And occasionally, like if I'm walking home at night by myself from the train or something, and there's a lot of factors. I mean, there's like safety factors too, but it's like,
Hmm.
what is the thing when I see somebody and I'm walking home and I'm by myself and it's nighttime? What is the thing that makes me cross the street to walk over to the other side? Or what is the thing? There's like these little reactions that I'll catch myself having, and I'll be like, why am I reacting to that person that way? Like, is that intuition or is that like some kind of prejudice that's in my mind? Oh, this person might be dangerous based on what, and is
Hmm.
that an intuition or is that some kind of cultural programming? And oh, this person looks out of place in this neighborhood. I mean, keeping in mind that violence is a real thing that happens
Hmm.
and is an actual concern, and safety is an actual concern. But like having that moment of self reflection rather than just taking everything for granted, I think is really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, it's so complex. Like it's never just good or bad, racist, not racist, whatever. There are so many like little nuances in everything because that moment where like you cross the street because somebody is coming your way, that's real. For those of us that are women or femme, we kind of have to be vigilant. That's what we're taught to do to survive in the society is be aware of our surroundings when we go out into the world. And at the same time, like what else is at play too? And I think that's one of the other things that's really important to me as I approach my work and just approach my relationship with myself is that I hold that complexity because getting stuck in the binary of good person, bad person, right, wrong, does not help at all. It
Mm-hmm.
is not conducive to my awareness, my understanding, my growth, because there's no such thing as completely good or completely bad or completely right or completely wrong. And we're so complex as human beings to try to fit ourselves into either of those things can be dehumanizing to ourselves, can ask us to not fully see the whole landscape of what we're looking at.
And so let's talk about this idea that you had for coaching as activism, because you are a coach, and I have a lot of colleagues in my life who are coaches of some sort, like coaches, business coaches, spiritual coaches, financial coaches, all kinds of coaches. Coaching's the hot profession these days. But this idea is coaching as activism. Two questions right away. One question, how do you define activism? If you were to give us a clear definition of what that means to you. And then two, why did you decide to focus in on the coaching industry and people who are in this type of leadership position for this program?
So activism, it's so funny. I've been answering this question so often, and nobody's really asked it of me up until like this past month. So activism, often when we think of activism, we think of like protests, direct action,
Mm,
organizing communities, petitions, things like that. Those are all activism. I also believe that things like parenting, art making, writing, teaching, just generally how you show up in your everyday lives can be a form of activism as well. So I think of activism as actively dismantling things that don't serve us in our society or in our communities, and also creating and cultivating either like new ways of being or new systems, new structures that better serve the collective, the community. And that shows up in so many different professions, so many different places. So I kind of take this broader view of what activism can be, because not everybody can go out into the streets. A lot of people can, but a lot of people can't go out into the streets and protest and put their lives on the line in that way. And with this program and my focus on like this industry of coaching and healing work, I grew up in this world. I grew up in personal growth industry world. My dad is a coach and has been most of my life, and it's been a really important part of me forever. And social justice has been a really important part of me forever. And I felt, especially once I went to college, I felt like two different people. I felt like that it was so hard for me to be in personal growth spaces because they had no analysis or understanding or context of oppression and unjust systems in our society. And then it was really hard for me to be in like social justice circles because so much of it is focused on changing systems, changing
mm,
institutions, or just burning down all the institutions, depending on your politics, but focus on outside. And I think it's changing a lot now, but there just like wasn't, in what I was experiencing, there wasn't a lot of space for talking about what's going on inside. And being a frontline activist, being a protester and an organizer is such heavy emotional work. So it was just really hard for me to be in those spaces because it was like there's so much going on inside of us, but we're not talking about it. And then on
mm,
the other end, it was like there's so much going on outside of us, but we're not talking about it. So I focused my college studies on bringing those two pieces of me and the two topics that I was most interested in together. And at a certain point, I just kind of got fed up and realized that I had this vision for a different way of being as coaches, as healers, as people that are doing transformative work, for us to do some deeper work, because we're already doing beautiful work. But there's things that we're missing when we don't bring in what's happening in the systems that we navigate within on a daily basis. So that was kind of like why I wanted to focus on it, because I'm a coach. And this has just been kind of my journey of really being my whole self, because it felt like I couldn't be in either space, personal growth, social justice. And after I wrote this blog post called Why the Self-Help Industry Isn't Changing the World, I realized that a lot of people felt similarly. A lot of people were like, whoa, me too. I've been feeling like I can't be both as well. So then I created the program, and here we are.
Yeah. And if you had one piece of advice that you could give to somebody who is in a leadership position or who is a coach, and I'm going to take that a step further and say, particularly somebody who wants to be of service to a population of people or to an individual who is not necessarily someone whose whole experience you understand. So, for example, this summer my listeners already know this, but you may not know this. This summer, I recently started a program in a Southside Chicago public school for high school students to teach them how to make podcasts. And these are also students who have diverse learning challenges and special needs. And so there's a few things there. I know how to make podcasts. I know how to teach in general, like, teaching pedagogy. I do not know what it is like to be a young Black man growing up on the south side of Chicago in a below the poverty line family who has been diagnosed with autism. But that is my student. And sometimes they want to talk about things like our president, or they want to talk about things like what opportunities are available to them after they graduate from high school. And there's the upbringing that I've had, with a certain amount of privilege that I need to acknowledge, where I'm like, you can be anything after high school. You can do anything. And that's not actually always true. And so for someone who's like navigating or wanting to be more skillful in navigating being of service and being able to be a leader and a teacher and a coach for individuals who may have a completely different background and a completely different experience of oppression or of injustice, what's like the first piece of advice that you would give somebody?
Ooh, yeah. Well, three things came up, or maybe it's more than three, but my first thought was listen. Like listen to the people that don't have the same privileges that you do. Listen and take it in and apply it. Listen to their experiences. And then also to educate yourself on the realities that they're facing. But then also to like never get so comfortable that you feel like you do understand their experience. To always know that you could never understand their experience. And that is both, to me, that's beauty, because that's the case even if oppression didn't exist. Like, there's no way that we could fully understand the experience of another human being. And that is what makes us grow. It's what, like, makes us create new things, and to be able to learn through difference, to connect with each other through different experiences is a beautiful thing. So to just like have that self-awareness that if you have privileges that the people that you're trying to serve don't have, then you will never understand, and there will always be a power dynamic at play that can be used in a various array of ways. But as long as the systems that are affecting them exist, there will always be this power dynamic. In the example that you gave, just in that like one sliver of it, you being a white woman, him being a Black boy or a Black man, there's a power dynamic there. And to not veer away from the power dynamic, but to just hold it and flow with it, and keep your awareness on it so that you can use it in the places where that Black boy may not be getting treated the way that he should be treated, or where his voice, in the system that you exist within, will not matter as much as yours. To find the places where you can use the power that you have, the privilege that you have, to benefit them, but then always coming back to like listening to their needs, listening to what
Mm-hmm.
they're asking for. Because a lot of times what can happen is, people hear about or learn a lot about a specific issue that's happening in the world or in their country, and coming from a place of privilege, they decide to go and try to implement a solution without really getting an analysis of whether or not the people that you're trying to help actually want that kind of help. And so to be aware of that too. That's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's called saviorism. And it happens constantly, and it's gotten this country into trouble, and gotten this world into trouble in so many ways, because of people with the countries with a lot of power going into countries that don't have a lot of power or a lot of resources, and trying to help without really understanding what the people that need help need. Those are some of my thoughts. I know you asked for one. But
No, I mean, if you've got another half hour, I mean, you can just keep unpacking your brain,
yeah.
because this is all really good and really helpful. And it's very helpful because I think sometimes there's this whole idea around privilege, and so I just really briefly, I went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C. right after the election, and I'm not somebody who typically would consider myself to be an activist. I'm not somebody who goes to marches. I'm not somebody who does that kind of stuff typically. But I was like, let me try this. Let me see what this is like. And there was a lot of racial tension happening within the people who were gathered for the march. And there was a lot of conflict on that front that I didn't anticipate. I was like, I thought we were all here for the same thing. And I thought we're all like women standing together. And that was the whole beginning of starting to unpack this deeper topic of like intersectionality and feminism and things like that, and what the problems are with that. And the phrase that I kept hearing was people shouting at each other, check your privilege, check your privilege. And that phrase was making me so angry. And there was like two parts of my brain. Like there was the one half that understood why someone would say that to the person they were saying it. But then I was also resisting against that phrase. And so I love how you were kind of saying, like, it's not about trying to deny that privilege or trying to be ashamed of it or be guilty of it or whatever, but to acknowledge it actually and say, okay, I have this privilege here. Like, what can I do with it? How can I use it to benefit the whole of everyone that's here and not just myself?
Yeah, and that's huge, is like to be able to acknowledge that you do have power, I think is really hard for a lot of people. Because I mean, one, to acknowledge that you have privilege. Also, side note, we all have privilege in certain ways. It's not just like a white black thing.
Yeah.
I have, like, though I don't have privilege in the sense of like racism and sexism and things like that, I do have privilege in terms of I'm not trans. I don't have any disabilities. I'm an American,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a citizen in this country. I don't have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about being deported. I've had a pretty well off education. I'm privileged in so many ways. So if there's anybody listening that's like, I'm not privileged, you are. Even if you've had a tough life, you've gone through a lot of things, that doesn't mean, having privilege doesn't mean that you don't experience any hardship. That's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely not the case. So, tangent.
No,
But
that's important.
but it is really hard because like we don't want to think that we've contributed to other people's pain, and we don't want to let go of these stories and experiences that we've had of feeling oppressed, feeling knocked down, feeling like, the world isn't here for us. And it feels like we kind of get in that binary of like, If I have privilege, then that means that I have just like floated through life. Like life has been good
Mm-hmm.
for me. And if I don't have privilege, that means that like my experience is valid, and it's both and neither.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that acknowledging it is crucial, because if you don't know that you have power, then you can't use it.
Okay, so what is your vision for what's possible in the work that you're doing? So, another way to ask that would be, what would a liberated world look like to you?
Mm. So I don't know about fully liberated, but I do. I mean, I would love to see the majority, at least in this country. I'm just going to focus on this country. I would love to see the majority of this country like actively working on their own biases, working on they how they've learned to relate to people that are different from them, and seeing that change just in education because like we take on all of the stuff that is supporting things like transphobia and ableism and all of these things. We learn them through our family, through our school, through just throughout our childhood and then on. So I would love to see, especially within like educational spaces, especially with young people, actively working out all of that, the gunk that we have within our culture, within our society, about people that are different from us. And I'm seeing that a lot. I'm like really in awe of people that are like 13 and 14. My sister's 15, and just like seeing like Teen Vogue right now is just so on point with the way that they're bringing intersectional thought into their just into the way that they think. So that's a biggie. And just in general, yeah, I'm wanting to see us actively working on it. It doesn't have to be perfect, which is why it's hard for me to like think of a fully liberated world. 'Cause I don't know what that would look like. But having people committed to sincerely making this world a better place for the people that take the brunt of the crap that we have in our systems and institutions and whatnot.
My last question for you is, do you have anything else that you want to share with us before we say goodbye?
I've just been kind of on this kick lately about, and we've talked about it a lot, just that like you have so much more power than you realize to affect these issues, to shift them in a better direction. And so if you're feeling hopeless or helpless or powerless, that's real, that's valid, and look for the places where you do have opportunities to influence people.
Okay, I felt so inspired and affirmed after getting off the call with Andrea Ranae. She really brought a breath of fresh air to a topic in my heart where I was feeling a little lost. Okay, a lot lost whenever I would think about it. I mean, okay, we did not solve all of the world's injustices and problems in this particular conversation. Don't get me wrong. There is a lot of work to be done. And that is why I encourage you to do the deep work, to start to think about how you and the people around you relate to people who are different from us. It's not always the easiest or most comfortable thing, but I promise you, if you consciously put it in your mind to start to pay attention to these moments where we are relating with people who have a different experience, and you start to look around and see what the experience of other people are, if you put this as a priority in your heart and in your mind, you will start to see things that you never saw before in new ways that you never imagined. And you'll start to see, as Andrea Ranae said, the opportunities where you do have the power to affect change for someone, rather than feeling hopeless and overwhelmed. You and Andrea Ranae and I might not be able to solve all of the injustices of the world, but we can make a difference. And it starts with awareness, acknowledgement, and working toward consciously building empathy. In fact, as I'm saying that, I just realized that I am going to post something which is not currently posted for you on that topic. And that is a guided meditation called Metta, METTA. And you will be able to find it at thecreativeimposter.com/magic. Again, you can get that guided meditation from me that I just decided I'm going to post as I'm recording this at thecreativeimposter.com/magic. I'd also love to invite you to check out Andrea Ranae's program, Coaching as Activism. This might be for you, even if you're not a coach. She's designed this program for anyone who is in a position of leadership or has the potential to be in a position of leadership. And that really means anyone who interacts with any other humans, by the way. Go ahead to andrearanae.com and check out all of the resources that she has available for you, including the Liberty podcast. I'd love to continue this conversation online with you and hear your feedback. What do you think? What are your questions? What are your thoughts? What are your observations? What resources do you have that I don't know about when it comes to creativity and social justice? What do creativity and social justice have to do with each other? A lot. I think the times that we're in right now call for us to be more creative in how we approach this topic and how we interact with one another on this planet. Okay, that's enough for now. All of the links for everything you need are in the show notes at thecreativeimposter.com/046. If you are loving this show and loving the value, I'd love to know. And here's how you can tell me. You can post a review in iTunes. In fact, I think you can even do it from the Apple Podcasts app now. You could consider making a monthly contribution to my production efforts via Patreon with some cool perks and rewards. Link is also in the show notes. Or you could send me a message. There's a contact page on my website, or you can message me through the Facebook group. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm excited to continue this conversation throughout the month. This episode was mixed by Edwin Ruiz of Mondo Machine. Our theme music is by Jovia Armstrong. I thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a week filled with opportunities to acknowledge and use your power and privilege for good.